Okay, we were now going to be putting in the oil tubes that circulate the oil across the two sides. However, I wanted to back up a little bit to where we put this oil tube in. I made a mistake in looking at the picture, and that O-ring was supposed to go underneath this, not on top, because you can look at the picture and I just saw that O-ring there. I drew the line, the dotted line there, to help to see it better, but I couldn't tell why it was just sitting there in the picture like that. So I didn't give it much thought, but it actually is supposed to go underneath that tube. So I took it apart, I took the screw out, and I gently lifted this and scooted the O-ring underneath, reapplied thread locker again, and put it back together. There was no O-ring groove either in the block or underneath the tube, so there was really no place for me to the O-ring couldn't go up into something and then be fully tightened. You just have to tighten it a little bit and hope that the thread locker holds. But you can kind of see the green O-ring there. It's squishing out a little teeny bit. There, you can kind of see it now. Anyway, so that should be okay per the drawing now. So back over to this, we are supposed to take silicone tubing and cut it to the right length. It says here, cut to right length to put it in there. So in order for me to figure that out, I took the parts I had number 32 and two number 43s. And so I set, there's a teeny, about probably the smallest O-rings I've ever seen right there, very teeny. So I won't push it on in yet. I want to put a little grease on that beforehand, but I just set it there. And then I take one of the connecting tubes. I'll undo the ferrule on it here. And I screwed it in here just lightly. There is an O-ring on here and there is a groove. So when we tighten this one down, we can fully tighten it. But there. Then I took a measurement here because I'm going to be stopping the tube about right there and going to its end. It's about 7/8 of an inch, maybe a teeny bit more than 7/8 of an inch. So I went ahead and cut some tubes, 7/8 of an inch long, a little bigger, so that they will fit right in there like that. All right. So the trouble I had was getting the tubing into this ferrule. I mean, trying to squeeze that in there. I tried lubing it, I tried everything. I could not push that inside of this ferrule in order to be screwing it on. So the only thing I could think of to do, which I did do it right here on the second side, I did get it inside of that ferrule, which is really tough. I decided I needed a taper on this, and so I'll show you here. I cut with one of my sharp X-Acto knives, and I just, you don't want to cut your hand, but I just tried to put a little cut on a taper here down. Cut a little piece off. I don't want to go into the hole, so I want to stay just above that. But I went all the way around, cutting a teeny little taper on this tube. Hang on a minute, we'll get all the way around. There, that's pretty good. You can kind of see the taper there. Okay, so now we should be able to get it started. Yes, you see, I was able to get it started, but we want to get it into the threaded part, so I have to just keep pushing and twisting It's coming in. There. I don't know if you can see it, but I think I've gone a little too far. I'll back it up just a little bit. So I want the threads to catch onto the part. There. There, I'm down a little teeny bit from the threads. So I should now be able to start this in the hole there, pushing it and turning at the same time to see if I can get it caught on the, there, I got it. It's caught on the threads now. And we tighten it up. Ugh, there. How does that look from the other one? Well, I got the other one a little, that's about the same. Okay, there. So those should be all set to put on here when we're ready to put it in. Yeah, that looks perfect length. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit of lube on this before I push it down, but I think I can go ahead and fit these on here because I gotta get this thing to go over that now. And I don't see that they have any kind of a clamp on here. Matter of fact, I think I may put a little grease, a little engine lube on this outer thing here. There. Let's see if that helps. Okay. And, oh boy, that's gonna be fun too. Okay, there it goes. Ooh, gonna slide off if I don't watch it. Okay. I may not be able to get it all the way on. All right, well, I'm gonna work and get these on here and then I'll come back. Okay. Well, after a big struggle, I was able to get those hoses on and we look like we're pretty good lined up. Okay, so let's add a little bit of the lube onto the O-rings here. Maybe I can get some down in that hole a little bit, I don't know. Okay, where's my paper towel? All right, let's see if this is going to work okay. I'm gonna, before I push it down, I'm gonna start these to in. There, and this one. There. Okay, and so I should be able to push that down a little bit more. There. All right, that went in. Let's tighten everything up. There and there. Okay, those look good, seated down on the O-ring and all. And you can't hardly see this guy, but it is pushed in pretty all the way. I can't, nope, I did click it a little bit more past that other O-ring. Okay, all right, so that is done. Next, we've got to work with the crankshaft. And it looks like we have a key that has to go in and some bearings. Okay, I will gather the parts. Oh, there's a little gear too. I'll gather the parts and come back. Okay, so we are ready here. I think I found everything. There was a problem with this gear. Says number 73. And if you looked over here at the packaging, 73 is this first slot right here. But what was in that first slot was a small gear, and it had no keyway slot in it. The gear I wanted was the next one over, 74. So I don't know whether the number here is wrong or somebody just put the wrong gear into the wrong pocket on there. But this gear, you can see, has the keyway slot right up there. And we need that because there's a teeny little, I was practicing getting it in, there's a teeny little keyway right there. So I'll take it out now. Okay, so according to this, I found in the bearing slot of this guy right in here. This one is obviously a flange bearing that we're looking for. You can see by the picture it's got a little flange there. So there was only 2 in there that had flanges, so I got the right bearings. Okay, so according to the drawing, we have to put the little teeny metal washer on first and then the bearing. So we can do that. I've got this little washer here, and we'll put that on. Ooh, that's a good fit. Okay, no play in there. There. And then the bearing goes on with the flange towards it. How's that gonna fit? Do I gotta press that on? That is like tight. I may have to do something to get that pushed on. Let me try the other end before I get involved in that. It takes the same thing, a little washer here, and there's the good diameter, and then this guy. Okay, that slid right on. Let me, bearings probably should be a little tight, but I could have it on crooked or something. Let me switch sides and see. There. Let's take this bearing and put it on here. Yeah, it's still snug. So I'm gonna have to get that on and tap it down probably. Meanwhile, let me put this on. Yeah, there we go. This is really, really good fit, that's for sure. All right, rather than you watch me fight this bearing down, I'm gonna stop the video and I'll come back then. Okay, wow. I got that bearing down. I had to cut my, luckily I have a little home machine shop with a mill and a lathe, and I used my lathe and I had about a 1/2 inch diameter aluminum rod, and I drilled a hole into it, and I used an O-size drill, and the O-size drill there, O is 0.316 of an inch. And if I go into inch mode and I measure this shaft, we're 0.315, and that one was 3.16, so it was a little bigger, because I didn't want to push down on this outside of the bearing, because that would really put a strain on the balls that are in there. I wanted to push it on that little ring that was on the inside race. So I had to make myself a specialized pressing bar. And then I held the thing by this underside right here. So it was straddled on a piece of steel like that, held here, because I didn't want to push on this and risk bending this in. So I put it across there, and then I used my manual hand press and I pushed it on down. And there it is. It turns fine and it's on. Boy, I don't know if anybody gets any of this at home. Yeah, you may have to have a few tools of your own to get this to work. I went ahead and assembled the gear here on here, which is basically putting the teeny little keyway on, and the gear has the keyway slot, and then there's a little E-ring that pushes on right there, which you can see the E-ring right on the top. But the issue I had when I put it on there, the gear moved. Bounce, bounce, bounce. It wasn't tight, and I wanted that. I wanted the gear to be tight on there and not move. So I needed a shim, put a little shim in between the keyway on the two sides of the keyway, or at least one side of the keyway. And I was digging through the package of stuff you get, and I found these guys. They're really thin steel shims. And I realized what they were for if you needed them. They're actually for the crank shaft, where it pinches around this diameter here. If it's too tight and won't turn, you can add a shim in there. Let me see if I can get to the page what we're coming up here on. When you do the pistons, yeah. When you do the pistons, this little diameter here, you have a couple of bolts that bolts down on there. But if that happens to be too tight, you can add a shim under one side and make it so that it spins nice on the shaft, but not loose enough to bounce around on the shaft. So that's what these guys were for. They don't have this in the documentation that I could find anywhere. But what I did was I had to cut the round part off of this darn little shim. See, so I cut it and just took this. Let me get that light out of it. I took just that thickness right there, which was just about right for one side of the. And I had to kind of lube it so it would stick, but I stuck it to one side of this little guy. And then I put the gear on, and it still wiggled, but not nearly as much. So I cut the other side, and I had to use scissors. It was hard to hold it. I had to hold the little thing with tweezers and get the scissors, right up there and cut it. So I was cutting away the hole and just keeping the material on one side or the other. Once I got the second one, I added it to the other side of the little keyway there. So I had a shim on one side and a shim on the other side. And when I put the gear up on it, it started on there fine, and I could feel that it was getting tight. And I thought, perfect. And I just pushed it all the way on, and I could hear it go, geek, made a little noise of it being like a friction fit. And now the gear does not move on that shaft related to the shaft. It sits real tight. And that's all helps part of the timing. You want that gear to be right so that you can set the timing of the ignition timing. Otherwise, if it wiggled on you, you'd have your timing off. Anyway, so that's what I did to get this thing going. I'll have to keep this in mind that we want to check the piston shafts. What do they call the piston arms? When we'll have to pre-bolt them to each of these arms and make sure that they spin freely, so that they spin back and forth on the thing, because they'll have to do that as it's spinning around, Okay, all right, so we'll be on to the next thing. Okay, so the next step is dealing with getting the crank into position. And I have rounded up the parts to make it a little quicker. So I've got, when I removed the top of the crank clamps, I guess those are what they're called, or maybe they're called bearing seats, I kept them in order here. So this one belongs here, and so forth. This one belongs here. I thought that would be a good idea, and then of course I read it after taking it apart. The bearing, here it says in red, the bearing seats are matched with each other. Do not use them interchangeably. And it wants me to use blue thread lock on each of those screws, which I thought that would be the right thing to do anyway. and they are about close to a 3 millimeter. And my torque guide in aluminum for a 3 millimeter socket is 1.5 nanometers. This is actually measuring a little smaller than the 3, but I think it's considered a 3. It's measuring 2.43. So it says it's 150. Maybe I'll do a 1.25 and see what that feels like first when I torque it down with my wrench here. So I might as well set something here. So I'm at 1 for my memory 1. If I go to memory 2, let's kick that to, instead of 1.3, we'll go 1.25. 1 and 2.5 right there. Okay, so M2, my memory 2 has got the setting I need. Okay, so it says to put the bronze and then add oil. Well, I've got this. I'll use my assembly stuff and I'll put it on it here. And so we'll put the first one in, and I'll get another one going. Getting it all over me, but that's okay. And then another one here. Okay, those are in. And then we set the crank into it. I have, just to back up a little bit from the way the drawing is shown, they're having me actually move it like this, kind of, because there's the oil things that we just did right there. And then, of course, it goes in with the gear facing that side right here. So I just decided to turn it so that the gear would be facing towards me like this when I put it in. So let's go ahead and put this in there. Okay, now it says to there's small screws, and I got those out of the number 7 area. These 3 little guys that are right on top. I guess they make sure you locate, and the screw will just barely go through this center hole up above so that it can't rotate completely inside. We don't want the bearing, that brass or copper stuff rolling around in there. And so I went ahead and put them in so that they were already sitting there. All right, and so now we have to lube those and set them down onto it. So let's start with the front one. To me, we'll get it lubed up here, there, and I think I want to make sure it is actually scooting down into it to hold that thing. So I'm going to tighten this up a little more. Okay, it doesn't actually thread into it. It just keeps it from rotating. So this one is the first one right here. And I'll take the screws out now, because they don't need to be in there. There. Okay, so that is ready. Let me remove these screws from here, and we'll catch those later. Okay, so that is going to go right across there. We'll hold it there. We'll get another bearing, put some of this lube on it, and put it in here. And make sure we're down all the way with the screw. Looks like we are. Good. And then we'll set it in there, just like that. Okay, and the last one, we'll do the same there. And I just wanted to let you also know, I didn't rotate them around. I kept them as I took them off and moved them over and laid them over. So that is exactly the way they came off of the machine here, off of the part. So I'm trying to keep those from turning at all. Okay, now I'm going to lay that right straight like that. We'll get the last one. Get some lube on it. Okay, there it is. Set it into it. And we'll set it on there. Okay. Now the other ones, they don't have those because they're on the real bearings, and so I'll just set those on. Okay, so now I'm gonna have to put the Loctite on everything and put these screws back in, and we'll use my wrench here. It does say to, as shown in figure, the crankshaft is assembled. Please note that number 7 screw should be aligned with the bearing bore before locking, otherwise the crankshaft may be stuck. Okay, so we need to make sure that these are locked into the little bearing thing. So I'm just tightening them up a little bit here, make sure I got them snug. Okay. All right, so let's see about putting on the blue thread locker. And I will go through all of these and get them in there, and then I'll tighten them with the with my torque wrench, and I'll bring you back before I do the last the torquing. Thanks. Okay, so I have Loctite on all of the little screws I put in, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 screws, and they're just barely snug with with the finger here. So I'm gonna run through here and try to tighten them down, and we'll see how this goes. There. So there was the torque on the one. There's the other one. Let's start up here. How are we doing? Yep, we're still spinning nice. I'm going to tighten that a little bit more. I can feel that tightens pretty good at 1 1/4. Okay, so this one is ready. There. It doesn't click like the other ones. It beeps, and you can get a green beep when you're right on the timing. Let me make sure these are down. I'll try to show you from the side view here. Okay, so let's see if we can do this one, and I'll try to do it from the side, and you can see. There, one. There, another. Oops. That one is not holding in very well. There. I'll come back to that one. Maybe I didn't have it seated all the way. No, it's not doing well, that Allen screw. There. I may have to replace that one later. There. Okay, so this one looks like the head stripped a bit. I'll have to look into getting that one fixed off camera. But we are spinning nicely. All right. And that's what they were afraid of. Whoops. That they didn't want that. I'm going to tighten these up a little bit now. Make sure they are holding the brass bearings where they need to be. Okay, that was too much. I think that's what they were talking about. You want to just tighten them enough to where they still spin. Yeah. Okay, it was the middle one that locks it. There. Not where it'll just run away with yourself. Maybe I'm supposed to have it a little bit looser. I don't know, but I don't want those screws falling out. Okay, there. All right, I think I'll read ahead a bit and see what's next. Okay, one last step for me to talk about with you is this last one here. Here it is. We are going to be installing the oil seal, which I pulled it out, number 40. The oil seal on the side of the shaft that has the oil pumping on it. So I've already turned the part around, and so that's the side we have to put it onto. And it would go on pretty easily. It's just rubber like that. And then it has to get underneath and inside the casting, as you see. So I have to kind of squeeze it a little bit, and then I can push it in like that. See, so now it's down and inside of the block bottom. Now here's a problem. I just figured I have to put a keyway on, but before I even do that, oh yeah, and the two washers, I'm not even going to bother yet putting those on because I got another issue here. So when I flip the page, they expect me to put this bearing into it with a key into the starter gear, and then they want this bearing to put on it here with the key into the over the end of the crankshaft. This is the problem right here. I went to test fit it, and it just won't go on. It won't go on. And I thought, what in the heck is this? So I measured the diameter of the inside of this bearing. Yeah, there we go. It's like 0.8, but it's really 7.99, which is basically the same as what this shaft is. If I can get it right, 7.99. So that means there's no clearance between the shaft and the hole, and it's line-to-line fit, which means it's a press fit. And I can't have a press fit when I'm trying to line up this little notch with this little notch. You just can't guarantee that you get it in line when you get down there. And I don't want to do that. It's all mounted in here, and I don't want to be press fitting this. So I'm going to have to freeze this. I'm going to have to put this whole block and everything in the freezer for, I don't know, 3 hours or something or more. I'm going to make sure this thing is frozen. Because when you freeze a shaft, it gets smaller. I really don't want to heat this. That would be the other option. Freeze this and heat this. When you heat, the hole would get bigger, and then it would just go right on there. But I'm hoping that I can only put this in the freezer, take it out, and quickly put this bearing on here with the keyway in it. It appears that it looks like it's a decent fit into this gear. It is at least got a little bit of a clearance tolerance. If I measure the gear, it is, let's get it wiggling here, 22.01. And the bearing has to be a little smaller, 21.97. So I have at least the ability to put this thing in here without having to go through this mess. So I can't go too much further until I get this cold. Let's see how these fit, because they're supposed to go next on here as a little spacer. They look like they fit fine. Yeah, they're nice and loose, and so I'm gonna put them on. I don't want them to fall off in my freezer somewhere. Okay, I guess I'll bring you back after I can try to assemble this. I may not be able to film it because I'm gonna be working fast. I gotta as soon as I pull it out of the freezer, I gotta get that key in there and get this bearing on it, and I won't probably be able to film it. Okay.